Spooky stories. Don't Google your own name. Why? Because you might not like what you find. One time I was bored, so I decided to look up my name in Google. My name is pretty unusual, so I didn't expect many results. Imagine my surprise when I stumbled upon a website where the domain name literally was my full name, www.myname.com. When I clicked, it took me to a forum. I browsed the profile of the site's owner and discovered that this person was my age and had the same hobbies and interests as me. The forum had no posts, but I was intrigued and bookmarked it. About a month later, I checked again. This time there was more content, almost like entries from a personal diary. Stuff like, the weather was nice today, or I'm so bored at work. At first it seemed random, but over time I noticed more and more details that matched my own life. The person lived in the same city as me. I thought it was strange enough that two people with such a rare name would exist in the same place at the same time. But then the diary entry started to mirror my own life almost exactly. One night I went to a baseball game. Later that evening, when I checked the site again, I saw the owner had written about going to the exact same game. At first I brushed it off. After all, tens of thousands of people in the city were cheering for the same team. But little by little, it stopped feeling like coincidence. Each time I visited the site, I noticed small biographical details that made me uncomfortable. For example, the site owner mentioned having a dog with the same name as the dog I had when I was a kid. He uploaded a photo of his car, the exact same model I drove back in college. He wrote about eating lunch at a certain restaurant, the very same place I used to go when I worked at my old job. And then one day when I checked the forum, I saw messages from people saying happy birthday to the site owner. That day was my birthday too. That's when I decided to finally post something on the forum, just out of curiosity. I wanted to say happy birthday and maybe add, hey, we have the same name. That's kind of funny. But when I tried to type, I realized there was nowhere to write. It wasn't a forum at all. It was just a static page. Weird. Almost like the owner had gone out of their way to make it look interactive, as if other people were posting there. But in reality, all of the content had been written by the same person. And that's when I thought, what in the banana muffin is going on here? I decided to send an email to the site's owner instead. Here's basically what I wrote. Hi, believe it or not, but we have the exact same name. Nice to meet you. It was just a friendly little message. The next day, when I tried to visit the site again, it was gone. Deleted. Then I checked my inbox. There was one new message, a reply to what I had sent. When I opened it, a chill ran down my spine. It simply said, I found you. My brother, Jacob, hadn't left his room for 3 days. Our parents wouldn't let me check on him. On the third night, when Jacob still hadn't come out, I finally gathered the courage to ask Mom. People don't sleep that long, I said. She was cooking yet another casserole, the 6th one that week. The fridge was already packed, but she kept making more. I watched her from the corner of the kitchen. Her posture was bent and a few strands of gray hair dangled over the food. I tugged on her sleeve. Mom, hey, can you hear me? He needs to get his strength back. She just shook her head. We shouldn't disturb him. Before I could say anything else, Dad walked into the kitchen. His eyes were red and swollen, but he was smiling. In his hands, he carried 3 cans of soda. I'm starving, he said. I can still taste that awful cafeteria food. I thought hospitals serve decent meals considering how much money they make, Mom replied. Yeah, right, Dad chuckled, setting the sodas down on the counter. Mom still didn't want us going into Jacob's room. By then, I was starting to get worried. From the kitchen, I could see his door at the end of the hallway. It looked like some abandoned lighthouse, with only a faded New York Yankees poster taped to it. There was a small gap under the door, just enough to tell if the light was on. But the room was still dark, just like it had been for the past 3 days. I turned back to Mom. Maybe we should check on him, I said carefully. But Dad kept talking, almost like he hadn't heard me at all. You know what I don't get? Why places like Andy's Diner or Burger King don't open little cafes inside hospitals. Hundreds of people sit around there for hours. It would be guaranteed business. It's all politics. They sign those huge contracts you can't break. Yeah, makes sense, Dad muttered. He stood right beside her, leaning close to the casserole. He inhaled deeply. Smells amazing. Hey, while the new one's still baking, why don't we fix up something from the leftovers? Mom smiled faintly. I think we still have some spinach and ricotta from yesterday. That was tasty, wasn't it? Delicious. Like very, very delicious, he said, his eyes fixed on the food. I couldn't take my eyes off the food. Jacob will eat too once he gets his appetite back, Mom said softly. I turned and took a step toward the hallway. The space between me and his door felt long and narrow, stretched tight like a wire. As the smell of casserole faded behind me, another smell took over. It reminded me of old gym socks, the kind that stink no matter how many candles or air fresheners you light. That smell cut through everything. The last time I had seen Jacob was when we were bringing him home after treatment. His face was pale green and his eyes kept rolling. Mom had told me to keep talking to him so he wouldn't shut himself off. I told him about my school friends and how they always play pranks on our teachers, like putting pins on their chairs. It wasn't true. I had only seen something like that in a TV show, but I was running out of stories. It didn't matter anyway. Jacob didn't respond. He just coughed, and pink drool dribbled onto his shirt. Danny, Mom said, maybe warm up some leftover food. Let's all eat together. Spinach and ricotta casserole. I can't stop thinking about it, Dad said. I dreamt about it last night. I ignored them and focused on my brother's door. I didn't dream about the casserole like Dad did. Another dream had held me tight that night. In it, my brother ran at me and snapped my ear. One of those games we used to play together. We'd tiptoe, then suddenly attack, snapping each other's ears and running away. In my dream, Jacob ran at me and snapped my ear, but I didn't move. I just stood there. He snapped, laughed, snapped again, sometimes so hard my ear almost flew off. Wake up, Danny, Dad said, snapping his fingers in front of my face. He was standing there, blocking the door to Jacob's room. Could you warm up 4 portions of the casserole? In case Jacob wants it, we can eat it before the new one's ready. I want him to try it too. It's one of your mom's best. I looked up at him and stared for a while. I couldn't put my thoughts into words, but maybe if I stared long enough, he'd understand. Dad just glanced at me briefly, then looked away. But in that brief moment, I saw something I didn't want to see. It was like looking into the tunnel of the deepest well in the world. Let's go, he said. He put his hand on my shoulder and turned me toward the kitchen. His voice got more serious. Better heat each slice separately. If you put them all in at once, some will be too hot and some too cold, and Jacob won't fully enjoy how good these casseroles are. Dad removed his hand from my shoulder and walked ahead of me. I lingered in the hallway for a moment longer. I turned to take one last look at my brother's door, thinking about how I would approach it and step inside. But I was scared Mom would yell at me. Honestly, I never liked going in there. Next to his bed was a vomit bucket, always filled with pink sludge, and his pillows were always littered with clumps of hair. Even before the last hospital visit, Mom forced me to go in and talk to him, but I always came up with an excuse, like pretending I had a cold and didn't want to infect him. When I couldn't get out of it, I stayed for a few minutes and watched him struggle to breathe. I told him about some TV show I had watched, then ran back to my own room. I lifted my head. I thought I was heading back to the kitchen, but I was moving toward his door instead. I didn't want to, but I kept moving like a puppet controlled by a puppeteer. I put my hand over the door handle, turned it, and opened the door. The smell of old sports socks hit my head like helium. Through the darkness, I could just make out my brother's face. Soft evening light fell on him. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. His arms were straight like rulers, but his fingers were twisted like crooked roses. I walked over to his bed. Red saliva dripped from his lips. James looked like a grumpy clown. I flicked his ear. It was solid. I stepped back and closed the door behind me. Walking back, I realized I couldn't even remember what his room looked like. Behind that closed door, he could be doing anything. Doing burpees, reading comics, plotting his next ear attack. Back in the kitchen, I heated 4 plates of spinach and ricotta casserole. Once they were ready, I wrapped Jacob's plate in foil to keep it warm. Then Mom, Dad, and I sat down at the table and ate in silence. Dad kept glancing at Jacob's wrapped plate. I hope he'll like it when he finally eats, he said quietly. Mom just nodded, her hands folded on her lap, not saying a word. I couldn't stop thinking about Jacob and the strange, almost haunted expression he always had. The casserole smelled amazing, but the tension at the table made it hard to enjoy. Each bite felt heavy, like we were all holding our breath for something. After finishing our plates, Dad picked up Jacob's foil-wrapped casserole. Let's hope he's hungry, he muttered. We walked down the long, narrow hallway toward Jacob's room. Every step made the air feel thicker, heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. I hesitated outside his door, staring at the handle. Mom gave me a small, encouraging nod. I took a deep breath, reached out, and turned the handle. The familiar smell of old sports socks hit me again. Stronger this time. Through the dim light, I could see Jacob lying still, arms straight, fingers twisted. I set the casserole down on the small table next to his bed, careful not to make a sound. Mom gently spoke to Jacob, trying to coax him. Jacob, we brought you something to eat. It's fresh and warm, she said softly. Dad added, it's spinach and ricotta casserole, your favorite. I stayed in the corner, watching. Jacob didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, unblinking. The red saliva still clung to his lips. For a moment, I wondered if he even heard us. Then slowly, he reached a hand toward the foil-wrapped plate. It trembled slightly, but he gripped it. The weight of that small movement made my chest tighten. Jacob slowly unwrapped the foil, revealing the casserole. He stared at it for a long moment, as if seeing it for the first time. Then, hesitantly, he picked up a fork and took a small bite. His eyes didn't leave the ceiling, but a faint shiver ran through him. Mom whispered, "That's it, Jacob. Just a little at a time." Dad smiled softly, relief visible in his red, tired eyes. I watched him eat, feeling a mix of fear and hope. It was strange. Something about the way he ate, so carefully, so slowly, made the air feel heavier, almost sacred. Jacob took another bite, then another, each one deliberate and slow. His body remained rigid, but the slight movement of his shoulders showed he was alive, reacting. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance, silently celebrating this small victory. I stayed back, noticing the way the faint evening light fell across his pale green face. Each bite seemed to bring a little more life back into him, a little more color, a little less stillness. For the first time in days, the house felt slightly less heavy, as if the air was breathing again. I realized then that even small, ordinary things, like eating a warm casserole, could feel terrifyingly important. After what felt like hours, Jacob finished the casserole. He didn't say a word, but his hands relaxed slightly, and the tension in his shoulders eased. Mom and Dad exchanged quiet smiles, careful not to disturb him. I lingered for a moment, watching him, then stepped back toward the hallway. The corridor seemed narrower than before, almost suffocating. Yet I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in days, the house felt normal, if only slightly. I closed Jacob's door gently behind me, leaving him in the soft glow of the evening light, and headed back to the kitchen. Mom, Dad, and I sat down, the 4 plates of casserole now empty. We ate in silence, the quiet almost sacred, each of us lost in our own thoughts. After dinner, Mom finally broke the silence. "That went better than I expected," she said softly, glancing at Dad. Dad nodded, still staring at his empty plate. "Yeah, small steps, but progress." I stayed quiet, my mind still lingering on Jacob's room, the way he had looked, the eerie stillness that had now shifted just a little. "I think we should keep this up," Mom continued, little by little, just like today. "No pressure, just care." Dad rubbed his tired eyes. "Agreed. We'll take it one day at a time." I felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. Relief that Jacob had eaten, unease because I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, something unsettling, was still lurking just out of sight. The house was quiet now, but the silence felt heavier, as if it were watching us. I tried to focus on ordinary things, Mom clearing the plates, Dad sipping his drink, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that faint, ghostly green of Jacob's face. The next morning, the house felt different. Not brighter exactly, but charged with cautious hope. Mom moved quietly, preparing breakfast with deliberate care. Dad sat at the table, reviewing his notes from Jacob's latest therapy sessions. "I think we need a schedule," Dad said finally, breaking the quiet. "Small, consistent routines. Meals, walks, even short talks. Nothing overwhelming." Mom nodded. "And patience, endless patience. He can't feel pressured or it'll set him back." I stayed in the corner, listening, feeling both comforted and tense. Routine sounded safe, but I knew Jacob wasn't just any patient. He was my brother, and something about his silence felt different, like he was keeping secrets. Dad looked up at me. "You'll help too, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'll try." Mom smiled faintly. "Good. Every little bit helps. Even just talking to him or sitting nearby. He needs to know we're here." The smell of toast and scrambled eggs filled the kitchen. Ordinary life was trying to creep back in, but I kept stealing glances at the hallway, imagining Jacob behind his closed door, still somewhere between sleep and waking, between reality and something else. I finally gathered the courage to step into Jacob's room. The air was thick with that old sock smell I had noticed before, mixed faintly with Mom's candles and incense. It almost didn't matter. Jacob's presence filled the space more than anything else.